We are looking at a situation that has completely exploded across the Nigerian political and legal landscape. And if you have been following the saga of Mazi Nnamdi Kanu, you might be wondering who this new figure at the center of the storm is and why the streets are screaming that he is wicked. The headline everywhere is asking what exactly Justice James Omotosho's personal problem is with the IPOB leader. And to understand this rage, we have to look at the events that unfolded just this past Monday, December 8, 2025, inside the Federal High Court in Abuja. It was supposed to be a day of hope for Kanu's legal team and his family, a day where they expected a simple administrative ruling to ease the burden of a man already facing a life sentence. But instead, they were met with a brick wall that many are calling cold, calculated, and unnecessarily harsh. You see, the narrative of wickedness didn't just start from nowhere. It is built on a series of crushing rulings that have left supporters of the Biafra agitation feeling like the judicial system is no longer just prosecuting Kanu, but is actively trying to break him. Justice James Omotosho is not a name that was on everyone's lips a year ago regarding this case, but ever since Justice Binta Nyako washed her hands of the trial following accusations of bias, Omotosho has stepped in with a gavel that feels heavier than anything we have seen before. The tension reached its peak on Monday when Kanu's team filed what is known as an ex parte motion, essentially a desperate request to move Nnamdi Kanu from the Sokoto Correctional Centre back to a facility closer to Abuja like Kuje or Suleja. Now, pause and think about the logistics here, because this is the heart of the wickedness claim. Sokoto is over 700 kilometers away from Abuja, where Kanu's lawyers are based and where the appeal court sits. Imagine trying to prepare a complex appeal against a life sentence when your client is a 14-hour drive away in a region that is currently facing its own security challenges. The motion was simple: bring him closer so he can exercise his constitutional right to an appeal effectively. However, when this request was brought before Justice James Omotosho, the reaction from the bench was not of sympathy or administrative flexibility, but of rigid, ironclad legalism that felt like a slap in the face to the Kanu family. The judge flatly refused the request to move him immediately, questioning why the application was brought as an ex parte motion without notifying the federal government and the correctional service first. To the layman, this sounds like legal jargon, but to the people watching, it felt like a deliberate tactic to delay and frustrate. The judge asked a stinging question to the lawyer from the Legal Aid Council, Demdoo Asan, asking if he really thought such an application could be granted without hearing from the other side, even remarking that a law school student would know that you cannot compel the government to move a prisoner without giving them a chance to speak. That comment, that specific dismissal of the lawyer's effort as something below the standard of a law student, is what has fueled the fire that Omotosho has a personal problem with the defense. It wasn't just a no, it was a no wrapped in a lecture that humiliated the defense team. But the drama didn't stop there, because the judge also had a tense exchange with Kanu's younger brother, Emmanuel. In the absence of a senior lawyer for a brief moment, Emmanuel tried to announce his appearance for his brother, a natural instinct for a sibling watching his brother suffer. Justice Omotosho immediately shut him down, stating clearly that he is not a lawyer and cannot move motions on the convict's behalf. While legally correct, the optics of shutting down a concerned family member in such a high-stakes and emotional case only added to the perception of a judge who is detached from the human suffering involved. The judge advised him to go to the Legal Aid Council if they couldn't afford a lawyer, a statement that rings with irony given the high profile of the case. It creates this picture of a courtroom where technicalities are being used to suffocate the spirit of the defense. Now, we have to contextualize this wickedness allegation with what happened just a few weeks prior, on November 20, 2025. This was the day the hammer finally fell. After years of adjournments, extraordinary renditions, and legal gymnastics, it was Justice Omotosho who looked at the evidence and handed down a sentence of life imprisonment. He ruled that the prosecution had proven the terrorism charges, citing broadcasts and commands given by Kanu that allegedly led to attacks on security personnel. For the pro-Biafra community, this judgment was the ultimate betrayal of justice. But what made it sting even more was the swiftness with which Kanu was shipped off to Sokoto. Supporters are asking, why Sokoto? Why send a man who is a target for so many different groups to a facility so far removed from his kin and his legal guardians? The conspiracy theory running wild on social media is that this isolation is intentional, designed to make him inaccessible and to mentally break him before the appeal can even get off the ground. When you combine a life sentence with an immediate transfer to a distant prison and then follow it up with a refusal to bring him back, it is easy to see why the word wicked is trending. Now, you really have to pay attention to the pattern here. The shift from Justice Ntanyako to Justice Omotosho was expected to bring a fresh perspective, but instead, it seems to have brought a harder, more uncompromising stance. Critics are arguing that Omotosho is acting more like an extension of the executive arm than an impartial arbiter. They point to his refusal to entertain the hardship argument. The defense argued that keeping Kanu in Sokoto violates his right to fair hearing because he cannot effectively communicate with his counsel to build his appeal record. If you cannot speak to your lawyer confidentially and frequently, how do you fight a life sentence? By dismissing this urgency and adjourning the matter until January 2026 for the other parties to respond, the judge has effectively left Kanu in limbo for another month. Every day in that cell in Sokoto is a day his health could deteriorate and a day lost in the fight for his freedom. The personal problem aspect is also fueled by the toll of the proceedings. Observers in the court noted that the judge seems to have zero tolerance for the theatrics that usually accompany this case. Unlike previous sessions where there might have been some leeway for political statements or emotional outbursts, Omotosho's court is described as sterile and cold. He reportedly told the defense that the rights of a defendant are different from the rights of a convict. This distinction is legally significant. Kanu is no longer an accused person presumed innocent. In the eyes of the law, under Omotosho's gavel, he is a convicted terrorist. This shift in status allows the judge to be much stricter, but to the millions who see Kanu as a freedom fighter, this legal technicality feels like hatred. They believe the judge is taking pleasure in rubbing this convict status in their faces by denying him the basic comfort of being near his family and lawyers. Furthermore, we must talk about the silence of the federal government in this specific transfer saga. By insisting that the federal government must be put on notice before Kanu can be moved, the judge is essentially handing the decision power back to the very people who prosecuted him. We all know the bureaucracy of the Nigerian state. Giving the government time to respond could mean weeks or months of filing counter affidavits, claiming security risks, or arguing that Sokoto is the safest place for him. Justice Omotosho knows this system. He knows that by not granting the ex parte order, he is inviting a long, drawn-out battle over venue that distracts from the main appeal. Is this a deliberate strategy to keep Kanu occupied with minor battles while the war is lost? That is the question on everyone's mind. It is also interesting to note the reaction of the legal community. While Kanu supporters cry wickedness, some legal analysts are saying Omotosho is simply being a black-letter judge, someone who follows the law to the letter without emotion. They argue that you cannot simply move a high-profile prisoner ex parte without hearing from the prison authorities who are responsible for his security. If the judge moved him and something happened to him on the road or in the new prison, the same people screaming wickedness would be screaming assassination plot. So in a way, the judge might be protecting himself from liability, but in doing so, he has alienated the public who views this case through a lens of struggle and liberation, not civil procedure rules. There is also the angle of the law school student comment again. It is rare for a judge to openly mock the competence of a lawyer in such a public ruling. It suggests a level of frustration or disdain for the quality of the defense being mounted. Was the judge angry that the application was poorly drafted, or is he tired of the case clogging his docket? This personal irritation seems to be bleeding into his rulings, leading people to believe he just wants to be done with Kanu, regardless of whether justice is perceived to be done. The emotional toll on the Kanu family cannot be overstated here. Imagine traveling all the way to Abuja, hoping to hear that your brother is coming home, or at least coming closer, only to be told to go back, hire a Becca lawyer, and wait for the government to have its say. It's a crushing blow. As we look ahead to January 2026, when this transfer case is set to resume, the atmosphere is toxic. The trust in the judiciary, particularly in Justice Omotosho's court, is at an all-time low among the pro-Biafra demographic. They see a man who has not only locked their leader away for life, but is now seemingly mocking their efforts to get him out. The wickedness they speak of is the feeling of powerlessness against a system that has every answer, every rule, and every technicality ready to block their path. It's a David versus Goliath battle, but this time, Goliath has the gavel, the prison keys, and the rule book. You really have to wonder what is going through Nnamdi Kanu's mind right now in Sokoto. Isolated, convicted, and watching his legal team struggle to even get a hearing, he is facing his darkest hour. And for the man on the bench, Justice Omotosho, he has become the villain in a story that is far bigger than his courtroom. Whether he is simply doing his job or acting out a script written by the powers that be is something history will have to judge. But for now, the verdict from the street is clear. They believe this is personal, they believe it is vindictive, and they believe it is far from over.